Which direction am I looking?
You look right at the camera. As soon as it goes live, it should use that video or that clip for the clip art,
Oh, I got you.
the thumbnail.
Well, the thumbnail is going to be, you know,
This is the temporary thumbnail for the live version, not for
I
the
got you.
yeah.
All right.
All right, all right, all right. We're getting started here. Automating your habits, analyzing the mechanisms of your brain. Got my
Okay.
tea here, sipping away at that.
Let me see. All right. So, welcome back to another podcast on nurturing our nature, where we figure out what is nature and what is nurture. Not directly. Just kidding.
Also, be sure to join on Clubhouse, where we will be unmuting ourselves when we speak and exposing our Clubhouse audio as well as our YouTube and Twitch audio on nurturing our nature. Should look like this. Hello, hello, Clubhouse audience. Unmuted, ready to go. Now, Daniel,
Somebody.
you actually are going to be leading us today on the excursion of habit analysis. We've been very blessed to come across a fantastic book, which has been inspiring a lot of the content we're making here. And as such, today we'll be going over the next installment in the analysis of mechanisms. Also, looking into Daniel's big brain, because he knows a lot about this stuff already, thanks to his research knowledge and professional study of neuroscience and physical therapy. Quite the brainiac, this man.
Uh, uh,
And paired up with my trusty boyo from the good old days. You're no slouch when it comes to breaking down scientific articles yourself, my good sir.
Mm, thank you.
So, together, we will create sparks. There will be fire.
There will be Burger King foot lettuce.
there will be foot lettuce.
We got the memes on deck.
All right. So, where to start? What if I told you? What if I told you there's actually a downside to habits?
I believe it. I've heard of bad habits and I've had a few bad habits.
Right. And so, one of the most interesting aspects of habits is how they have that automaticity to them, and they can become, in a sense, difficult to control. I love that they referenced in the book Plato and Socrates. Basically, Plato and Socrates talked about how we have will, we have like our conscious desires. So obviously, we have those motivations to be greater than what we are right now. If you're in a work position, you want to climb up the hierarchy, you want to reach that top position. So there's obviously conflict that can come up through this. So if we're trying to be our best self, but we're in a state of, like, let's say, taking on habits like eating food that slows us down throughout the day, or like watching television all the time, that kind of like puts us in this like zombie state. Why do we do that? And so Plato and Socrates called that, it's weakness of the will, which is kind of interesting, because in some sense, like before we even had like the modern psychological approach, they're talking about will. And we know, and as we're going to get into further, that willpower is actually something that we can demonstrate through psychological studies. And it's something that you only have so much of throughout the day. So I thought that was a interesting note. So habits are typically uncontrollable unless an inner force of will acts upon that habit. So it's kind of like an inertia effect where you keep on doing this thing until a greater force acts upon it. So it's like the same exact concept there. And so what is that? What is that force that has to act on it? That's your will. That's your volition. That's your conscious desires to reach something a little bit greater than what you have at this present moment. And like kind of just talking about some of those prior concepts that we've hit in earlier episodes, we know that when you have to like volitionally go in and take yourself out of the automatic mode, out of the habitual mode, that takes a lot of willpower, and that's very challenging to do. It's very uncomfortable. And so I think that's like what a psychologist does, at least part of their job is to help guide their patients through those difficult situations where they're like, I don't like this person that I am. I don't like these automatic things that I'm doing. Like, I find myself wasting a lot of time, like doom scrolling first thing in the morning. So, how can we how can we potentially, if changing habits if changing habits is an act of will, and changing habits is very like demanding, because these are things that we obviously do automatically, you don't have to think too much about it, and it's very comfortable to settle into these. how can we how can we break out of that, and how can we make it, in a sense, like more comfortable? What do you think?
I love what you said about inertia. It's almost like the repetition of our behavior. Every time we do it, we're adding an extra tick of speed to this behavior that we're doing until eventually it gets to a point where we don't even have to keep our foot on the pedal anymore. That thing's just going. It's now habit driven behavior. You have no goal of doing it, you have no intention of doing it. The book even talks about how we don't even have like awareness sometimes. There's no conscious awareness of the habit, but the behavior gets done. And I think the inertia is a great way to uh, kind of imagine, if, because like we were saying in the previous episodes, it's very hard to measure habit. It's not a physical thing. We can't see it. We can't feel it, touch it, smell it, taste it. Maybe the behaviors we're doing are physical, but besides the point, if you could help our audience and help each other have any kind of physical rationale or understanding of what a habit is, I think inertia is one of the best ones. And as something with inertia, you need something, physics speaking, you definitely need to have something capable of stopping that moving object, or else it's just going to plow right through it, you know? And in this case, the only thing that's capable of stopping the steam train that we've built through repetitions of behavior is our willpower. And it's almost like a protagonist in a movie. All the odds are stacked against you. Only thing that could stop this train is your willpower, and you only have a limited meter of it every day, and you only have so much of it. And eventually, it gets to a point where you don't even want to do it anymore because we'd rather have the comforts in our habits than stand up to the steam train and let it hurt because it hurts, to be able to fight back against the habits that you've built. And I would love to, I think, study more about willpower. It just sounds like such a fantastical thing. Willpower, the power of will. It's like, what is this? What are we talking about? Like, what is willpower? It's just your like stats on how much you could will something, you know? And I think we all have experienced in our lives many tasks that demand willpower. And really, I think to me, it's just the ability to go against the odds, go against the comfort zone, and push yourself through the discomfort in order to attain the goal that you want to achieve. You have to have that willpower. I would love to find more studies discussing the psychology of willpower alone, because it's very clear that as we're studying habits here, which could be either amazing and work for you, or they could be bad habits and working against you, willpower is one of the only things that you can use to combat it. um, so I would love to learn more about how to strengthen my stats and willpower. It's very interesting.
It's it reminds me a lot of, like, in so many video games, it's the endurance gauge essentially. It's like, okay, this is the meter that essentially goes down when I try and make moves. As I'm trying to make moves throughout life, I see this meter slowly start to go down, and I have less and less abilities to do what I want to do. So there is some evidence that does exist with regards to the discussion of how can I improve my willpower, and it kind of goes something like this. Okay, you reach that point of mental fatigue, and one of the best times to do this is at the end of the day after you finish an entire like work day. Okay, so I've just finished essentially sitting. Let's say it's a really boring desk job. I've finished answering emails, getting phone calls, getting sales, doing all that sort of thing, and then I get home. You are toast usually after that, and like you might be able to squeeze in like a nice walk or something like that, but you don't really have much mental energy after that. It's like increasing the resistance. Like, it's so funny. Almost everything in life you can apply to like the gym mentality, but you reach that point of fatigue and you push a little bit further. Okay, and you actually, you can, this is measurable. So I've hit that point at the end of my workday. I'm tired as crap. I don't feel like doing anything. You spend that same day, when you've hit that point, when you know that you're tired and you don't want to do anything else, you literally put it on a timer. You say, I'm going to spend 15 to 20 minutes today pushing into this zone of discomfort where I am mentally fatigued. I have zero willpower to do anything. This is how you increase your willpower. This is demonstrated. This is actually something that you can do. So you reach that point of mental fatigue and you push a little bit further and you measure it so you can actually gauge your improvement over time. So I say, today I'm going to do 15, 20 minutes. Guess what? I'm going to try and repeat that the next day. Still doing 15 to 20 minutes. It's kind of like my 15 to 20 pound dumbbell. What am I going to
Low
do?
resistance.
Yeah, exactly, man. Just a little low resistance there. And then what's going to happen? Let's say the following week, I'm going to increase that to 25 minutes. And I'm slowly going to find that this gets easier and I'm able to do it longer. And so, what are some examples of those things that we could do? Okay. Instead of you just going for a walk, let's say, well, for 25 minutes, you engage your mind in something that is very willpower intensive. That would be something like reading a book, because we know that reading books are more, it's a lower bandwidth. You essentially have to sit there and process every word versus being spoon fed pixels on a screen. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to look at a screen and like just have like the LEDs like bathe you and you just take in the sounds, and it's that's a way easier mode of getting information. Um, so that's with regards to how can I improve my willpower. You treat it a lot like a resistance training program, like in the gym. It's it's just you're doing it for your mind. You're doing it for a greater long-term goal, because ultimately if you can improve your willpower, you're going to be a force of nature to be reckoned with, because there is no point where you're going to get tired and you can't do those great things that you will have. Not what Socrates and Plato called the weakness of will. You'll have something so much stronger, dude. Amazing stuff, because you can do it.
Now, I know you won't mind if I stay on a gym. Oh, be sure to. I know you don't mind if we stay on the gym analogy here. You're mentioning an incremental increase in resistance to get this willpower up to snuff. I think there's a lot of quick fix tips and tricks, get it now type culture that convince people that they could increase their willpower or their endurance, their ability to overcome and reach greater goals instantly. And it's almost like imagining telling someone, "Oh, you can get your max up, you know, to double what you're at today by tomorrow. You just gotta get this really, really massive weight. And if you can push this massive one, then doing your maximum should be easy, you know? And in that case, it would be not incremental. It would be just like an overload, you know? And I think, I don't think anyone intentionally asked for that when it comes to increasing their willpower. I think most people, like you, are smart and they find incremental ways of increasing their willpower. If anything, I think maybe like traumatic or unexpected events might be an example of something that forces you trial by fire to overcome a challenge, and then that may unconsciously evolve your willpower to being increased. But I think staying on the safer side, as I would recommend with weights, if you want to increase your max and your ability to lift heavier weights, the best thing to do is do it incrementally, because in the case of your body, you want to train those muscles to be able to take that weight and gradually increase the weight so that they could damage and repair in a way that it's within your means, you know, as a human being, you know, with normal muscle mass. And same thing with your brain. You know, you have to do stuff incrementally, because you could snap, you could run out of willpower, and then you're two steps backwards, you know? You might not pull a brain muscle the same way you might pull a muscle in your legs or in your shoulder or whatever. But I mean,
You'll
what do you
fall into
think?
poor habits.
Yeah, you might fall into some. That's a great example. You might fall into some poor habits. You know, that's something that our brain might, when I say snap, you know, it might give out, it might give in, and you know, giving in is a great example too for people that, let's say you're trying to overcome addictions and such, rather than being unrealistic. And I know there's a lot of research on cold turkey versus gradual, but without going too much into addiction psychology, I think that's another example of, or another mentality of imagining these two approaches. It's, do you either want to go trial by fire and just quit it altogether, and then if you snap, you're just going to revert back harder than ever, or do you kind of train yourself to gradually and be prepared for the discomfort until eventually you're able to overcome whatever challenges that once controlled you, you know? But you know, either way, muscles or brain, you can get fatigued, and you have to be patient with yourself. Go on, Daniel. What do you think?
I think it's a great discussion, like the cold turkey versus like a gradual tapering off of whatever addiction you're trying to break or whatever poor habit you're trying to kick. Um, I think there's something to be said about the evidence that you give your psyche. So if I repeatedly fail at something, I'm going to start giving myself evidence that I can't accomplish this task. So let's say that I've picked up a smoking habit. If I'm repeatedly providing myself with evidence that I cannot overcome this smoking habit, then I would say it is more likely that you would benefit from the tapering off approach, the not cold turkey approach, than you would from the like hardcore, I'm just going to kick it all at once right now. Because a lot of times that repeated failure ends up telling your brain, which will then dump it into your subconscious. It'll say, this isn't something I can do. Look at all this evidence that I have to suggest that I cannot. And then you will internalize that, and you're gonna create a self-limiting belief around that. And that creation of that self-limiting belief is it's 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 almost impossible to overcome, because then you got to do the psychological digging in your subconscious, and that's a lot of work. So there are that's some of the, I would say, the cons to doing the whole like cold turkey approach. Because if you repeatedly fail at cold turkey, and you repeatedly fail just saying I'm going to cut this out right now, like some people have success with that, but I would argue that that might not be the vast majority. Like the cold turkey approach is very challenging.
Yeah, and stepping away from general addiction psychology and such, but just trying to apply this to a general audience in the sense that everyone has, to replace addiction to, like we said, like nicotine, to any bad habit. There's so many things that we're consciously aware of, or at least maybe even, I'm sure if you ask a family or a friend, hey, do I have any bad habits? I'm sure they could tell you a thing or two that you might not even be aware of. And being able to stop those can be very demanding. And one of the reasons being that the habits are automatic. Like we've said so many times before, they're independent. By a certain point, they become independent of intention. And having the simple awareness of it is oftentimes out of our grasp if we're not looking for it. You have to, I mean, what do you think? Like, you have to record yourself for a week, like do like a little documentary of yourself until you kind of start to pick up on, hey, every time I go to the kitchen, I open the fridge and I do this and that. And then after that, I do this. And it's like you start seeing the patterns. I think that might be the only way to check in on your habits. But even then, there's so many things that are just thought processes. How do you record that? You can't. How do you tell someone, oh yeah, you can't just quit cold turkey, but then you also say, oh yeah, it's also really hard to measure, and you have to practically become hyper self-aware in order to recognize all of the emotional and the environmental cues that lead you to doing that behavior. It's definitely possible, but there's a lot of work. It's just like working out, like you were saying before. You gotta make sure you got the right equipment. You gotta make sure you're doing the right stretches beforehand. You gotta make sure you're in the right location, nice safe location, nice encouraging, motivating location. There's so much that goes into building a good routine. I think the same goes for habits, whether you're trying to build them or break them.
There's a lot to work with in what you just said. Um, I'm gonna say just one overarching thing to all that because I just had like a thousand thoughts as you were saying that. I think setting the expectation for the discomfort to come, I think I think that sets the tone so that when the rubber hits the road and the going gets tough, you don't just quit. And so you kind of have in the back of your head that like, oh, I just need to hang on. It gets better from here. Like when I'm trying to build positive habits and I really don't feel like doing it, like I just need to keep trying, and it's like hang on just a little bit longer, and you sort of set that expectation for yourself. Like that there is going to be pain and there is going to be discomfort because habits that are great, the ones that are worth keeping, usually unfortunately they have to come with discomfort, but that just seems to be a universal in this world, which is the things that are worth having are usually very challenging to get. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And then talking a little bit about how it becomes automatic, these habits can go against our will. They can go against what we want out of life. And I want to dive a little bit into like why that happens. So the book talks a little bit about how layer themselves habits layer themselves in other habits. And that's really interesting because there's a contextual element. So we talked a lot about how context is super important for the development of a habit. But what if I told you that the habit itself can become an actual an actual context? So and you kind of talked about this last episode, layering habits in each other. Like the night before, you set out your gym bag and you know automatically the next day because you've layered it into your day that you're going to wake up and you're going to go on that run. Um, but I want to get into a little bit about how can habits layer themselves into a way that might hold you back, and looking into like your day. I think there's a really interesting thing. What do you do first thing in the morning? Like you might roll out of bed and let's say you walk over to the bathroom and you start brushing your teeth. I was thinking about this like as I was reading this chapter, and it like blew my mind because it's making me think like how much how much of our personality is dependent on this context. Like if I roll out of bed every single morning and let's say the second I hear that alarm, I'm having a set of thoughts that makes me more prone to not enjoying my life. I'm not having a narrative repeatedly when that alarm goes off. I'm not having a mental habit that says, I'm going to crush this day. I'm going to make the most out of it. You start developing a habit that is within the context of another habit, which is waking up at the same time. It's like habitception, dude. It's like Inception, bro. It's like what elements of our personality are dependent on habit, and it seems like a lot we can do a lot of damage if we put ourselves in these contexts and we're repeatedly like noticing at the same time every single day. I'm not motivating myself. I'm not telling myself like the morning's such a crucial time. I'm not telling myself that I'm going to crush my workday, that I'm going to be like delivering like for me like delivering the best patient care possible, that sort of thing. So if I'm this, like you said, this takes a little bit of like mindfulness. Like at what point during each day do I notice that I start having like a negative set of ruminations, and start breaking that down so you can recognize it and then start inserting the exact opposite of those negative thoughts. We lost our companion. I will take this. We'll keep the show going here. So I want to get into a little bit about this. When I was diving into the literature, there's 4 primary features of the automaticity that accompanies habits. Now, what exactly is automaticity? That is the automatic nature of habits. Automaticity is essentially how much something continues to have like action within your life. Where did Rene go? Without you consciously thinking about it. So there are 4 primary features of this. We have efficiency, non-intentionality, unawareness, and uncontrollability. So when I talk about efficiency, what does that mean? Habits have been demonstrated through dual tasking to show that there is limited interference when I add in a second task. Basically what that means is if I'm doing a habit and then I add in, let's say I'm playing the guitar and then I've played this song or this piece so many times, I then add in singing to it. I'm able to continue playing that without much challenge. That's the dual tasking. There's less interference from that secondary task because when I'm doing a habit, habits by nature are efficient. That means that they're able to run by themselves without requiring too much of your mental willpower. Let me see where my co-host went because he's gone. Hey, bro, are you still on the thing? You're not in StreamYard anymore, bro. We'll keep it going. Do I need to send you another link? Hey, shoot me a text. Shoot me a text. I can't hear you. Oh, okay. My co-host computer had overheated. That's what happened. Okay. All right. Yeah, I got you. I'll put in my headphone for Clubhouse. Okay. 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 Um, I'm gonna stop on the habit content and just, I guess, entertain the masses because we have we have some people watching, so I don't. Yeah. Hey, I'm listening to you on StreamYard though. If you got anything, let me know. I'm just gonna start. I'm just gonna start going, bro. All right. What is up, guys? What's up, Beijing? All right. Let me see here. You got any Schopenhauer fans out there? I'm a Schopenhauer fan. I want to dive into his philosophy a little bit while we wait for good young Rene to come back to us. Transcendental idealism. That's intense. Let's see here. Hmm. Let's see. Ooh, we got some goodies here. Is ignorance really bliss? Okay, play guitar live. Play guitar live. No, this isn't the guitar show. Welcome back.
Well, hello there.
I literally just surfed the internet for like 5 minutes.
I'm
I was
sorry
trying
about
to
that.
find like some thought-provoking questions.
Well, I'm sure you could have thought of some provoking questions without me, but thankfully I'm back. And I apologize to the audience. I really don't know what happened. I think it was just we're expecting a lot out of my computer. I
Rene,
have ordered,
please,
yeah,
please don't do
I've
this to
ordered the
me.
parts and I've ordered what I need for a new setup. But as of now, this is what I've got to work with, and it doesn't want to work with me back. But thank you all for being patient and for allowing us to go on with the show. Hopefully, we didn't take up too much time, or I didn't take up too much time stalling here. This could always be edited out after. But as for the live audience, thank you very much for sticking through, for being here with us. It means a lot. It really does. With that, I would love to go back with what Daniel was saying. He was going on describing the layering of skills when it comes to habits and how much of it is actually involved with our personality. That's where I left off, at least before I entered the void of the black muted space.
Yeah. Let's see here. So I was talking a little bit about how habits get layered into where are you going, bro?
No, no, I was just closing the door. Please go on. I'm listening. You were saying
I
layered.
feel like did I finish the thought though? Basically,
I was listening the whole time on Clubhouse.
okay.
So I was listening, but I just couldn't hear me through the live mic. But
Yeah,
please, I think it'd be good to recant so you can kind of get on
yeah.
back where you were discussing. I'm sorry, guys.
I'm I think the thoughts that I was thinking are just along the lines of like how much this is like the theory of personality change. Um so how much of our personality is sort of like a habit, you know? How much of it is based on me placing myself in a context and then behaving a certain way when I get those contextual inputs. So I think basically what I was saying is it's important to recognize like when you're in a context and what elements exist that lead to what behavior. So it really is a mindfulness thing, kind of slowing yourself down to like analyze what has led me to act in this way. And then you can repeat those like kind of it's like any science experiment. You can repeat that. Like repeat those contexts that led to desirable behaviors in your life. If you notice that you wake up at a certain time, you're more likely to commit to productive habits as opposed to waking up, let's say, at like 11 a.m. versus waking up at 7 a.m. Like, set that context repeatedly if you're realizing that it's giving you the results in your life that you actually want. And that's an interesting one, too. I'll have a little side discussion on that. How you communicate certain things to yourself when you wake up early and you say, I'm going to be up when the sun is up to get stuff done. That's one of those, like, it's almost like a subconscious communication. I'm telling myself that I'm worth this effort. I'm telling myself that it is worth it to wake up this early to get stuff done because I think I'm worth it. I think it's worth it for me to put in the effort to get up and go run, to get up and walk, to get up and study. So instead of me sleeping in, I'm saying, no, I'm going to wake up. I'm going to get this stuff done because I think I'm worth it. So you communicate in certain things to yourself. You communicate almost like it's like you communicate value. You communicate value through action. And I think that's a really interesting thing without you having to tell it to yourself. Like, man, I'm the bomb. Like, I'm going to wake up. I'm going to make this day awesome. It's like, no, get up and do it, bro.
I know the phrase "actions speak louder than words" is meant for interpreting the behaviors of other people, but in this case, it's almost as if actions speak louder than words of, oh, I gotta do this, or oh yeah, I gotta stop doing that, or just kind of the little inner dialogue that you're self-aware enough to recognize that you need to show improvement in certain areas. But if you don't actually put the action down, you're never going to change. We're talking about overcoming behaviors. We're talking about overcoming automatic habits in your life. And talking about it is great. Discussing it with your friends and family is great. I'm sure. And, people have therapists talking about it with them. Good. That shows that you're self aware. But actually doing the action to overcome these behaviors, I know I'm sounding like I'm beating a dead horse when I say it's difficult, but man, you really got to do everything in your power to put some, you know, I want to say willpower to give your
Mhm.
to give your willpower more.
You got to invest energy to make it happen.
And what you're saying here about, the context of the good habits and kind of giving yourself, like you were discussing about waking up early and the snowball effect that can have on your life or on your day. Absolutely. There's so much potential waking up earlier in the day. There's so much more you can get accomplished in the first. Now, I maybe I'm generalizing, but in the first 5 hours of the day, I'm sure there's more you can get done there than in the last 5 hours of the day. If you're staying up late and you're staying up between the hours of 10 and 3 a.m., you know, I'm sure there's more you could do in that morning 5 hours than in the midnight 5 hours.
You are 100% correct because of neurochemical priming. Think
There we
about
go. So it's not just
cortisol levels as a result of sunlight, like
right
literally
cortisol
sunlight
like
exposure and wakefulness hormones go together.
absolutely. Absolutely. Not to mention the fact that if you have any inclination of networking, I would assume that the people in your society are more prone to networking between the hours of 8 and 12 in the afternoon versus midnight and 3 a.m., unless you're going out to, the club or something. But in that case, I don't know how productive the networking is going to be, you know? So,
What? What's that?
yeah, right.
You want to get a drink?
Hey man, jokes aside, if I ever go out again, I'm wearing earbuds because these places are louder than I remember them. But that's a side note.
Oh,
I gotta wear little earmuffs when I go out. Bass is too strong. But yeah,
all right.
I absolutely. Speaking of, and how much of your personality? I mean, I don't know how have you felt lately about what we've learned here and the self awareness that you've gained towards your habits. But how often do you feel like your morning routine determines the personality you have that day? It's almost like you're determining your NPC's stats for the day based on your how you went to bed the night before, how you woke up and got ready for the day, and how you entered the professional atmosphere. It just all stacks onto each other until you recognize that they're all just layered skills, they're all layered behaviors, and they all do influence one another. And they influence how you behave. And the more, I'm over here having like inception uh, existential crises when I'm like, wow, I'm just determining like the type of NPC I'm going to be today. Like I'm just a self-aware NPC because like you think you have control over all these habits, but oh my gosh, once you got a few contexts in a row, it's just autopilot. But now that we are discussing this with one another and with the public, I hope that they realize you can have control. You don't have to be an NPC. You can actually determine what context you're going to put in your day the next morning and then sprinkle in a few of those in the afternoon and in the evening, whether it be at certain times or with certain stimuli, such as coffee, or whether it be with certain music, whether it be with certain discussions. There's so many ways that you can kind of trigger good behaviors by doing something rewarding or doing something at a chronological moment in your day that gives you the little bit of oomph to boost your stats and willpower for that day. That might not just help you make good habits and good decisions, but that might also make you better at stopping any kind of impulse that you have from previous bad habits that you're trying to break out. Like we were talking last week with the light switch, those things are just automatic once you hit the right context. But if you've been buffing up your willpower stats all day, when you do have that bad context that wants to give you that impulsive thought to do something, that's a bad habit, you have enough, strength here mentally to say, you know what, nice try, brain, with that bad habit impulse, but nay, nay, I'm stronger today. I'm going to go on and go for a little walk. I'm going to go
And
talk to
think
my
about how
friend.
you feel at that moment. The moment that you walk away from a crappy habit that you've been trying to break from a lot, like for a very long time, because you've put in the work on developing your willpower. Like, what a what a huge moment that is. Because you can
That's
look
an
at yourself
underrated
and
thought for sure. Being able to hype yourself up or be proud of simply denying yourself from a bad habit.
it's it's like you've evolved and you've reached a new level of, it's like conquering this piece of yourself that's just been around for so long. Like poor habits are things that stick around, and it's almost like it creates cognitive dissonance because you'll wake up and you'll see yourself doing that thing. Maybe you don't have too much control over it, but you still get that little bit of cognitive dissonance when you fall into a poor habit, and you're still like, you're frustrated about it. There's a part of you that doesn't like it. And so the day that you successfully overcome that, like, that's a, and you reflect on it too, like that's a great moment. It really is.
And I'm sure if you, like we were talking about it in other episodes, about like journaling or noting down, in your second brain, as we called it, you
Mm.
know, noting down little things that you want to do or that you like or that you want to draw attention to. Imagine being able to overcome a bad habit, getting faced with that cue, that environmental cue, denying the impulse, and then making a note of it. Like, hey, I feel like a total badass right now for being able to overcome this cue, being able to say no. Sometimes even physically, sometimes might even be like, hey, buddy, let's go do such and such, and you have to physically say no to this person, and it's not just your own brain, but you're also saying no to your friends that are delving in this habit. There's layers.
Friends can be context. That just
Ex-
clicked in my head as you're saying.
exactly. Oh, 100%.
Your
Friends can be
friends are your
contact.
environment.
We're a
And if you,
social animal.
dude, so if you, this gives credence to the whole idea that like your closest five friends have a massive impact on the trajectory of your life. So if the cues that you're getting from your friends, as we know in the literature talks all about the importance of cues, if the cues that your friends are setting up for you are cues that lead you in the wrong direction, and your friends are all participating in, let's say, behaviors that they're not in line with the best life that you'd like to live, like that's a cue that you're getting that's going to send you spiraling down into habits that aren't really serving you. So
Right. And everyone knows how hard it is to say no to those impulses. I'm sure people also understand how no it is, or how no it is, how hard it is to say no to people, in your friend circle or in your family circle, whatever it is the case. Saying no is a skill that people need to learn, because uh, you might be too weak with your willpower that you're just trying to people please. You might just say yes because you don't want to make people feel bad, or you don't want to be left out, FOMO, you know? And if you can have the self awareness, not only can you say no to others, but you can also say no to the impulse itself. And I don't know, what do you think is easier? Do you think it's easier to say no to, a social setting, or is it easier to say no to the impulse in your brain? I would say the brain, because you have to have like the self awareness to even recognize it, and you have to have the willpower to go over the behavior. Then you also have the evasion of bad cues and the promotion of positive cues. There's like way more layers to this one. Whereas a social yes or no is just a yes or no. Now I understand people that are sometimes really pressured into saying yes or no because like they just are so willing to people please. But I don't know. What do you think? Like, is that an introvert extrovert type of character trait difference?
I'm gonna say I agree with you. I think what we're saying in our brain is a very private thing, like the monologue that you're having. So that makes it a lot more difficult because it's not like something you have to outwardly do and you just, like you said, make a yes or no decision. It's like, nah, man, there's a lot more going on in your head.
Yeah, there's like, with always, as we discussed so far, there's so many layers, you know, into actually catching the impulse itself. And something that I wanted to talk about today. Excuse me, I'm still nervous from my computer leaving earlier, but I want to talk about the goals and how we have to have goals when we're being intentional, but then once it's reached this autopilot state, it becomes a habit. How do you revert back to making the goal the strong motivating factor versus the habitual automaticity of the behavior being the strong factor that has control over you?
How do we revert back to goals?
So let's say you have a habit that you're doing. At one
Hmm.
point, you had a goal for the habit. Let's just take, we're talking about friends here and socializing. Let's talk about social drinking, right? At first, the goal of social drinking was to participate with your friends and to get
Make
comfortable in the
friends,
environment. Right.
make more friends. Yeah.
There's a bunch of logic that you could apply to why drinking, right? Um, so that was the goal. So at first it was very intentional. It was like, yeah, I'm going to get a drink with these people because I want them to like me or whatever, stupid young youthful logic that you're applying at this point in time. And then eventually you reach a point where there's no goal. It's this time I'm going to drink, or I'm in this environment, I'm going to drink. There's no longer a goal as to why you're doing it. There's no longer the intention behind it. It's just lost. Is it possible? My question is it possible to bring it back to where you actually have a goal when you're doing a behavior and still be able to do it, but with a goal in mind? So, in other words, let's bring context to the same example. Let's say you reduce the amount that you drink. You're no longer drinking every time you're in this environment, or every time you're in this, with this circle of people. But let's say you're at a wedding and they're, cheersing to champagne. They got the little like ching ching. You're making a toast. It's the same behavior. You're drinking, but in that case, it's like very intentional. It's like I have a goal to do this to like honor the celebration of this moment with my friends and family. Versus I'm just in this environment. I'm going to drink. Is it possible that same logic, applying it to other things, whether they're good habits, bad habits, is it possible to still do the same behavior, but it not be automatic once you reach the point of self awareness of the behavior?
This brings me to an interesting thought. So, I think in short, the answer is kind of yes. Um, so it's that concept of willpower again. But this brings me to this point, which is that goals direct willpower. Like within the context or the overarching framework of a goal, you can make that willpower direct you. So it's almost like the car is your willpower and the fuel is the goal.
And then eventually the goal is no longer needed because you have so much inertia, and that's when it's like habitual.
Right.
We're
Exactly.
zooming with this car analogy. I think that's great. Yeah, it's I think it's very underrated, the potential that you could bring to your willpower when you give it a goal. You know, it's like all this pent up potential energy to do something great with your willpower. You have it. Like, I mean, you hear it all the time when they say, "Oh, he's got great willpower." She's got great willpower. You know, they've got this great determination, but they have a goal, and that's how people on the outside can even see that they have got great willpower because they're witnessing these people overcome these adversities to achieve their goal. The goal is the little carrot in front of you, you know, in order for you to actually go in that direction, you know? It's what drives you. So when it comes to habits, if you're able to go back to where it all started and find that goal and really like solidify it, that gives you like increased stats in your willpower. And then you can go ahead and use that to address whatever habit it is that you're trying to create or break, you know? Because the habit themselves, they no longer need the goal. They're just this like machine that you've created through repetition.
Exactly. And so I talked a little bit about it before, but I guess now that you're here, I'll keep going on that, which is basically there are four primary features of automaticity, and that's what accompanies the habits. And automaticity, if you don't know yet, it's the automatic nature of an action that you're doing. So those four elements are efficiency, non-intentionality, unawareness, and uncontrollability. So I'm going to hit that first one. I talked a little bit about dual tasking. So the efficiency of a habit is really seen when they did dual tasking experiments. And so let me break down what that means. You're doing a habit, but you throw in another task on top of that habit. It's dual tasking, meaning two things. So they're able to demonstrate that if you're doing a habit and you throw in a secondary task, you're still able to perform that habit efficiently without interruption from that secondary task, versus when you take in a non-habitual task, and let's say you're trying to perform this non-habitual thing that you're doing, and then you throw in a secondary task on top of that, that non-habitual action that you're trying to do falls apart. That's kind of what they've demonstrated. So if you're doing a habit, more than likely, since it's so automatic and it's so efficient in your brain, you're able to do that without any challenges, like when you add in a secondary task. So this is like one of those things that they kind of use to confirm that, yes, habits are efficient. They run without the need for very much conscious input. So that second element that I kind of talked about was the non-intentionality. That's the frequency for which a behavior is performed, and it's more likely to be performed without conscious willpower. So you can say what you want to do, but you're more likely to perform a habit. It's non-intentional by nature. And this kind of goes back to our initial definition of like what a habit is. They're just automatic. And habits are also unaware. Like they occur subconsciously. So they occur in our non-declarative memory, which is procedural. This basically means that you can do a habit without being able to break down exactly what it is that you're doing. So like walking, the gait cycle, I'm not telling you every single muscle that I'm firing as I'm walking throughout the day. Like as a kid, like when you were just learning how to walk, like that is like you have to break down each step, like to go from that seated position to like pulling yourself up onto the couch to like just let go of the couch to support your weight, to try and like move one leg after the other. like like at that point, like you're thinking about each muscle that I need to coordinate to make walking happen. So walking is one of those, it's like it's a great way to demonstrate that like habits, like the habit of walking that we love to do every single day as we go from place to place, it's unaware. It's it's part of that non-declarative memory. It's procedural, it's more complex. So it's difficult to consciously think about what goes into that habit. Another great one would be like holding a pencil, like or holding a pen. You don't really consciously think about like what muscles are going into that. It's very non-declarative. Like if I was to ask you right now, like bro, what are you doing with your fingers while you hold that pen? Or like while you're drinking water? Like exactly. Like you're not sitting there like, oh, this is how I need to turn my hand and like I need to like flex my elbow this much and extend my wrist this much. You're not thinking about any of that. It's in your non-declarative procedural memory.
Man,
Um,
but there's so much. There's so much. I want to stop you for a second.
yeah,
'Cause I could spend an hour going on each of those topics. the starting from what you just mentioned, the awareness. It's so true. We don't have um, we're not thinking about it consciously. I think that's what it means, right? With independent of awareness, we're not really the habit itself, the behavior. It's not necessarily performed with micro decisions throughout the actual action itself. It's just done. The mechanism of your body, the ergonomics of it, it's all just done comfortably on autopilot, where you could be thinking about something completely different and still performing the behavior. And then, as you said, with independent of intentionality as well, that's kind of what we were talking about before. There doesn't have to be a goal anymore. It's just happening. And most importantly, I think the coolest thing you mentioned is that habits are efficient, and this is why we do them. This is why animals, in general, are habitual creatures, because we only got so much energy in our day. We almost got so much time that we would spend. So we have to reach this point where we're just really got our behaviors down to an automatic science. And that also leaves room for us to think about anything else that might come across our day to take up the energy that we have remaining versus what we've been spending on our day-to-day tasks. Do you think that making a behavior more efficient is what actually drives it to be a habit? Do you think that if something is inefficient, it can become a habit? Or do we just do that inefficient task efficiently once it's reached habitual form? Because I was thinking about the other day, it's not like everything we do, every habit is an efficient thing. You could be doing plenty of behaviors that are that might be even counterintuitive to something that you're doing later. But if you actually have reached this point of habit behavior with it, it's just efficiently done within itself. Gosh, I feel like I went in circles with the word efficient there, but I
that's
think
deep.
I think it, I
No,
think it's it's just
it's it,
ironic.
it's deep because it's like
It's like a
it's
rat wheel. It's like you're on the slope,
you
running in
select.
circles as
I I
efficiently as possible, but
I
it's
think
still an
we
inefficient task.
I think we definitely select for efficiency. Um, it's funny. It's almost like it speaks to the human psyche and the human nature. It's like, bro, if we can do something with less effort, we're probably going to do that. Like, uh,
It's like a whole society
does that
nowadays,
say that humans are lazy? Is that what that's saying, or does it say that there's bro? Oh, this is deep.
Ooh,
Okay. So that's the animalistic side, which is trying to select for efficiency. It's trying to select for caloric saving. But the non-animalistic side of ourselves, the higher aspect of the self of being a human being, is literally going exactly against that, using the higher brain, using the more spiritual, the wholesome elements of your human psyche to reach beyond your comfortable habits to make yourself better. That's that's huge. It's like the non-animalistic side. Like there's a part of you that wants to be lazy, that wants to be comfortable, that wants to just remain in the same set of habits. But you can ascend beyond that through using your willpower. And it's non-animalistic, it's non-comfortable. It goes against, I'd say, the animal side of the human.
But then on that point, you can make these behaviors that to your primal self seem less efficient towards caloric expenditure or to your management of resources. You could overcome those with behavior and do these other habits or other behaviors rather that are more demanding. But once you do those enough, your body still adapts and starts finding a way to make those behaviors efficient. And then boom, now those are your habits. You know?
Right.
Like
Your
you're
audio started playing in two places. That was so weird.
I'm sorry. It was just too powerful. Yeah, I was essentially just saying that you can move away from habits or behaviors that are efficient to your primal self, to your caloric expenditure, and add other behaviors that are less efficient at face value. They're more demanding of you. But if you stick to it and you use your willpower to continue to repeat these behaviors, eventually your body will find a way to make these behaviors efficient until eventually they themselves become your habit.
That's deep. So that's ascending Maslow's hierarchy right there, bro. At least that's one piece of that puzzle.
It's like the lobster, you know, you will extend yourself, you start growing past your current shell, and then you bust out of it and you build your new shell. All that takes a lot of energy, caloric expenditure. It all takes
Bust
a
down,
lot of
Tatiana. Hey.
it all takes so much, energy for that little lobster. But then once it's in that new stage, that new tier of the pyramid, its shell's formed, it's good, it's comfortable until it feels the need to grow again. So it's just a constant cycle of facing discomfort in order to bust out of that shell and leave your other behaviors in the past and build new habits. It's crazy, bro.
Dude,
We're just lobsters.
we are just lobsters. And what if I told you
Sustainable. We're just lobsters.
rise your dominance hierarchy?
Dragons.
What if I told you that learning can take place subconsciously?
Oh, and I was gonna be like, yeah, 100%. I know that, and then I was like, actually, technically, it's subconscious. So do I know that?
So this was something I came across when I was reading it. It was weird. Um, I, it wasn't something I knew beforehand, bro. So if you knew that, good for you. That's, ooh, I'm stinky. Um, so, um, implicit learning is what this is called.
Implicit learning.
So implicit learning, essentially, this is learning that occurs without conscious input. It's non-conscious learning. So how can this happen? It goes to the whole efficiency concept. So I'm going to use the gate cycle again as like as a really prime example of this. Um, so as you're walking, you kind of like neurologically you fine tune which motor units to fire at which time at which rate so precisely. And the more that you've done that, let's say that you're a young kid just learning to walk, the more that you do that, the more precise you get with firing those motor units, with recruitment of different muscles. And this isn't happening consciously, this is all subconscious. This is learning. You're learning how to walk more efficiently. You're learning that I don't need this much force when I'm lifting my leg up to move my leg forward.
Or this is too little force. I'm dragging my feet.
Exactly. So this is implicit learning. A lot of it is procedural, again, but it's like as you're doing different habits, as you're doing different skills, different tasks, you're learning through the execution of that task how to make it more efficient. And this was something that I was blew my mind because now there's a term that I can like use in my head when I talk about this stuff. It's like it's the process of fine tuning the different skills that you're doing. And this brings me to guitar too. It's like when I'm playing a piece, like, and I'm trying to really speed up like a passage that I'm playing through, like a set of notes that I'm trying to like really shred. It's like what is actually happening there? And I have a feeling that part of that is implicit learning, because as I move from this part of the fretboard to this part of the fretboard really fast, it's like implicitly my brain is, it's like, okay, this is how much force you require, but if you put too much force here, you're going to overshoot. If you put too little force, you're not going to be fast enough. So implicit learning is essentially, it's this whole it's this whole set of like things that go down subconsciously that aid us in our desire to fine tune our habits and our skills.
Right. It's almost like it's your subconscious trying to guide you into being comfortable with habits that are, or rather behaviors that are more efficient, that feel right, that get you to that goal a little bit faster, maybe. Or maybe they're more just efficient calorically or just more comfortable.
Mhm.
And I would like to think that these are all conscious decisions, but really it's impossible. Like the more you think about it, the more you realize how much happens subconsciously. If you're focusing on one thing, you're subconsciously focusing on the other 100 things going on. So you might think, I am consciously focusing on playing this guitar, and your body's like, yeah, well, you're not focusing on your foot placement, your seating placement, your
Your
head
breathing,
posture, your breathing, your
your
heart
butt
rate,
in the chair,
yeah, exactly, like
the
how
butt
you're holding
groove.
the pick, how you're holding your fingers on this area right here. Like you're only consciously focused on one section of the guitar, and then the rest of what your body's performing and how you're perceiving the environment, it's all subconscious. It's crazy. I know this is stuff that we already know, as a society, that our brains consciously are just a little spotlight. That's how we are. Our conscious mind is just a little window, a little spotlight into what's actually happening in our world, which is just this big panoramic view. And even when it comes to these habits, the ability to gain awareness of the behavior, you have to practice because you have awareness now of one part of that behavior. The more you keep at it, the more you use that willpower to bring attention to this behavior, the more you start like a little detective picking up on the cues that are leading you to doing this behavior, that are leading you to do this action. It's just, it takes a lot of time. And I'm really excited to talk about this because the subconscious is something that I wish we could tap into. I think there's plenty of ways that uh, people have learned how to become more receptive to their subconscious actions, but it's never really something that you could just look into like a window. It's just running back there. Maybe in your dreams, you might be a little peek in there.
Ooh, you're getting into something, bro. There's some psychological literature coming out about, it's this pendulum. I forget what it's called. It's like a brain reconditioning therapy that they're actually starting to employ now in common psychological practice, where you basically follow something and you move back and forth at a certain frequency, and it's supposed to operate as REM sleep. And REM sleep, we know, is like essentially the point when the subconscious mind is most open, and it's when you're processing things and kind of like storing stuff in your subconscious mind. So they've found that they can actually somewhat tap into this by getting you to do the rapid eye movement. That's what REM sleep stands for. REM is rapid eye movement. So they're finding that you can literally
Are you kidding?
start, dude. This is a topic for another episode that I'm
You're
sure,
telling me that all the fictional, hypnotic, magical mystery boyos with the little pendulum swinging back and forth, all that hypnosis, voodoo doodoo, is actually just people triggering people's eyes into REM sleep.
dude. There was
Whoa,
something. There was something to
there's
it.
something there. I could see the logic. I could see it.
Yeah,
Your
that's
brain
been.
associates the REM eye movement, that's repetitive, but the rapid eye movement to the subconscious being open and allowing it to spill into your conscious dream. Are dreams conscious? I asked as a a curious boyo who has not read up on this quite yet, but is just curious.
I don't think dreams are conscious. I think dreams are, as far as I've read and understand, the subconscious integration of your day-to-day activities, memory formation, and obviously, I think you can see like traces of your day
Sure,
in
sure.
your dreams. It's really interesting. Like if you write down some of it, you're like, oh, that's potentially where that came from. It's almost like it's your brain's encoding process, but it's kind of like an amalgamation of all your experiences plus the experiences of that past day where you're trying to essentially store it.
I agree, but my question would be: is your awareness of the dream, or in other words, you, the viewer of your dream, is that conscious? Much like how our habits are automatic and
Ooh.
subconscious, and the behavior happens automatically, but you can consciously be aware and view the behavior happening or the impulse coming across your brain. So the conscious part is the viewer, yourself. And same with the brain. The dream itself is being scripted by your subconscious, but you, the viewer of your dream, is that part conscious? Much like we are in our reality, in our waking hours, how the habit is automatic and out of our control, but our viewing and our awareness of it, we can bring consciousness to that.
It depends on the amount of volitional control. I mean, some people in their dreams feel as though they do have volitional control over what they're able to do in their dreams. So I would argue that if you feel as though you're able to manipulate what goes down in your dreams, that you are in some sense conscious of that, because I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's you.
Right, right. Okay, this we can save this for something else because I want to read up on this.
That's Yeah, that's interesting.
But that's definitely fun to just play with in your mind a little bit, those thoughts.
um I guess I'll wrap it up with one last piece here from the reading. um So, like I was talking about before, there were four primary features of automaticity that accompanies habits. That last element was uncontrollability. And so they've demonstrated that habits, in some sense, are not controllable. I mean, like we're talking about, yes, we can, through willpower, get a hold on our habits, but there is some research out there. It's called action slip research. And it's basically demonstrated that, yes, habits are often automatic, yes, but they typically occur when we're doing an automatic and familiar task. So my favorite example, you're doing this automatic like discussion. You're putting yourself in this whole situation. Let's say you're at a restaurant and the waiter gives you food and he says, "Enjoy." And what do you say? "You too." And you're
You
like, "No,
too. Oh,
No,
not
you're
again.
not eating the food.
Or another good one, you're driving home from work and you have your routine drive, and your girlfriend or your waifu, she said, "Hey, can you stop by the grocery store on the way home?" And you're doing your routine drive on the way back from work. The entire time, because it's your routine drive, you did the same thing and you didn't stop by the Publix that she asked you to stop by. It's action slip. So you're doing an automatic and familiar task, but you slipped because, well,
Right. You were
research has
expected to do something
demonstrated
outside of that, and you just
exactly.
went on through with your habit.
And so there's other studies that have kind of demonstrated this a little bit more objectively, other than like action slip research. Several studies have looked at the actual brain activity that happens. So after an action has been sufficiently practiced and has become habitual, we've found that brain activation decreases, specifically in our favorite region, the prefrontal cortex, which is that guy that we talked all the time about in meditation, which is the boyo that thickens, increases in gray matter with more meditation. Um, so if that's the case, these are the key processing areas, um, and they're becoming less active, as well as like the cingulate cortex and the posterior parietal cortex. All those regions that are associated with executive function, advanced thinking, and reasoning. Like those all start to decrease in overall brain activity, which was seen through EEG studies. Um, so if that's the case, I think that further lends credence to the fact that yes, habits are in some sense uncontrollable if the regions of the brain that are associated with conscious control are gone.
Right. It's not like the those areas of the brain are certainly not gone, but the action no longer has to
Decrease, I should say,
bypass.
not gone.
Right, but the action no longer has to bypass through these regions of the brain. You know, the behavior no longer has to be processed by these regions of the brain before executing the action. That's how it maintains this automaticity, this level of unawareness. Because when you are first learning how to swing a bat or something, you're super conscious about how you're swinging it and how you're doing this and that. You know, your footing and everything. It's all very conscious. And then once you reach this point of automaticity, and it's a habit, you're no longer processing this swing in all these areas of your brain, like the prefrontal cortex that you mentioned. I think it was the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, and the posterior parietal cortex.
Your
YAR. So once that action no longer has to go through those little checkpoints, checks and balances for the action, it's just like autopilot, which makes sense why we become less aware of this too, because it's not stepping through all these little different regions of the brain. It's not like ping ping ping. It's no longer doing the little, I want to say it's not ping pong, but you know, the little like arcade pinball machine.
no, that's
It's
that's
no
a
longer
great
bouncing through everything.
that's a great way of
straight to the spine.
giving an analogy to it. Yeah, it is. It's like straight to the lower regions of the brain because a lot of like the more complex activities tend to like send the signals to different regions of the brain because it's like, hey, did you get that? Did you get that? Did you get that? We're coordinating, as opposed to something that's more automatic, a habit, more automatic. It's just like we know everything we need to do. We'll send it down, as opposed to like the whole the whole ping pong thing. That's like a perfect way of describing it. It is like a game of pinball almost.
Pinball. Yeah, you
Yeah,
just bounce it
exactly.
up around there.
Um, but that is the general gist of what I have prepared for today. That's the first half of chapter 4, and that is the psychology of habit formation edited by Mr. Vasper Plankin.
Yes, sir. In fact, I think it'd be good. Maybe we could do this next episode when we go more in depth on this chapter. But I think it would even be good to have the references for each chapter listed somewhere because although most of this is our interpretation, these guys need to get all the credit for the amazing work that they've done on the psychology of habits. It really is enlightening, and I hope that you all are gaining as much benefit from this study as we have. So thank you very much to all the authors that have contributed to this work, and of course the editor Vasper Plankin, and the um, Springer, I believe, is the name of the
Publishing house,
publisher.
probably.
So quite literally, shout out to all of them, and a million thanks. And I hope that next time we can go more in depth into this chapter and bring out some of the juice that is available in this amazing textbook. And I'm going to make a note here to look into for some fun time on the next episode the psychology of dreams and the consciousness of it, or rather the subconsciousness of it. If you have any questions about that, please let us know in the comments, and I will happily be your little research runt, and I will go through and find any relevant articles and describe it for you all here the next time we speak. So thank you to Daniel, and appreciate all the patience during my technical difficulties. As you've seen from the first episode, we are slowly increasing our technical capacity, and I'm still in the process of doing so. So hopefully, my little computer here is gonna be. She's got
It'll be okay.
she got a
It'll
little
be
nervous
okay.
today, man. She
It's
got a little
okay,
nervous.
little guy.
But thank you all. This has been great. Here on Nurturing Our Nature, There's so much room to improve, and I think that's a great analogy to the actual psychology of ourselves and how much we have to improve as we explore the nature of our minds.
Bruh.
It's free real estate.
Yeah.
Hey, Peter. Hey, Peter, why is there a frog over there?
Hi-yo.
Hi, my name's Kermit the Frog, and I'm a frog, obviously. So I could be here. I could be there. But I can't be at home because Miss Piggy's mad at me.
Miss Piggy.
We better get off. We're gonna...
Get out of
All right.
here.